Good morning and welcome to live Q&A here in the Manager Critic group. For those who don't know me, I'm Cheryl Andrews. I'm the founder of Step by Step Listening, and we're all about helping you to get clarity of what you want and the confidence to make it happen. So how we do that is through a process of non-judgmental listening, learning to ask questions that give people the opportunity to really listen to their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own emotions, so that they can get clarity and understanding of their own decisions. So today I want to talk about the subject is, are your decisions wide enough? So for many of you, you know that I'm just about to, I'm writing the book Do, Delegate or Ditch. And so having worked with clients for about 5 or 6 years, what I discovered is that when I asked them the question, what would you like to have happen? People would answer their question, whichever way they did, because we all have our own natural way of processing information. And for many, many people, having clarity of what they wanted was enough. Once they decided what they wanted, they would take some action. They would see that they got a different result or a different response. So if they were actually doing something, they might get a result. If they were saying something, somebody might get a different response. And just that process of knowing what you wanted, taking action, getting a different result or response, gave them confidence. And so they repeated the process and they carried on. And some never needed to come back to me ever again, because actually they just had lost sight of how to ask themselves the questions. So they might ask themselves what they'd like to have happen, or if what is working or what has worked in the past. And that slight change of focus was enough for things to shift, to change. For other people, there was a pattern that kept reoccurring. And what I started to notice is that people who initially made that their outcome that they came up with included themselves, included the whole of the system, so it's wide enough, they were the people that were most likely to actually take action and for it to work. Whereas the other people, the people that were their decision, perhaps they were in fight, flight or freeze, they were in the drama, they were in survival mode, they were making very quick decisions that they gave them some respite, it got them out of trouble, it got them out of danger, but actually it didn't serve them in the long term. So the decision wasn't, in that I call that deep enough. It was a decision that was going to be okay for them today, but it didn't serve them in the long term. So therefore they needed to revisit it. And so one of the things I do with the Clarity, Constant Change workbook is I get people to think about, and I'm going to leave these with you today. I'd love you to share it down below and just notice which of these questions you can answer easily and which ones you struggle with, because we are all different and we all have a different timeline and different time processes. And so we can all perceive time very differently. So some people, when I ask them what they'd like to have happen, will naturally tell me, you know, I've got one guy I worked with once that he had a 100-year vision. So in the next 100 years, this is what he wanted to have happen. And so he was talking about a massive vision. And other people, I'll ask them what they like to happen, and they'll be talking about like in the session, in the next 90 minutes in that session. So depending where you're at, you'll have a natural default of a timeline where you'll either be big picture thinking, blue sky thinking they call it. So you'll be sort of very much about the vision. You'll be able to perceive and experience things in the future. And a lot of data will be included, but in a few words. So my vision is to change the way the world listens. That's quite a big vision. It doesn't sound like very much, but I have to start with one individual and help that individual to change the way they listen to themselves. And that's where I start, and that's what I work with. So we need to think about what would you like to have happen, and just notice for yourself what sort of time frame you naturally come out with. Secondly, then have a go at it doing the opposite. So you might look at what would you like to happen in the next 5 years? What would you like to happen in the next 3 years? What would you like to happen in 12 months? 90 days? 30 days? 7 days? And today? And as you stretch yourself to go through those questions, you'll start to notice which ones you find easier than others. So one of the reasons I like the wealth dynamics as a model is that some of us are very big picture. I'm actually on the blaze energy, so I can switch between big picture and the detail of day to day. So I have my brain comfortably does it, but because I do switch between the two, and I'm often doing it calibrated by what other people want and need from me, so I'm adaptable to other people's needs. When it came to my own goals, I often didn't stay with the big picture long enough to get all of the detail. And I didn't drill down long enough to get all of the detail of the day-to-day activity. I didn't have some simple tasks that I could do, tick off and have that sense of satisfaction every day. So in terms of my clarity, I often actually swang between the two. If you're somebody that's very big picture thinking, what generally happens is you have the vision of change the way the world listens, and don't really have a concept or an idea of the detail and the minute detail of the things that need to happen every single day for the next 20 years in order for that to happen. So what can happen is you become frustrated because things aren't happening fast enough, and it's because you're not consciously aware, you don't have clarity of the smaller detail of what needs to happen. And those of you more in the temple energy, you're much more in the moment, very sensory. So if I ask you what you want to have happen in the next 90 days, you may not even know. It's like you can't perceive it, you can't visualize it, you're experiencing it right now, and you're very in the moment. And so what can happen about people who are very in the moment, and what I've noticed as a pattern, is that they tend to be really good about being present to the person that's going on now. And as if they're given tasks of what to do and when to do it, they get on and do it, and they're very present to that situation, which is a great skill to have. But they spend a lot of time worrying about the future because they can't perceive it, they can't imagine it, they can't work it out how it all works. And so Mark and I, as a husband and wife team, I'm on the blaze energy, he's on the tempo and the steel energy, he's on the accumulator. So he tends to be very good at being in the moment, and I tend to switch between the two. And so the downside for both of us is often I don't have real clarity of the future, and he doesn't perceive the future naturally. So we do have to invest and really consciously think about what's the future going to be. And then between us, we can balance the system out. So that's the first thing. That's how deep is your question, your decision, not your question. So that's one thing that happens. And I said today the subject was about how wide. The other thing I found when people are in crisis and they're making decisions is that they tend to make a decision that is compartmentalized. So the brain is really good, and I don't think it's gender specific. I think men do it generally, not always all men, do it this are better at this. And I've actually modeled people who compartmentalize, and I've actually worked out how they do it, and I can do that now. So it's not that it is gender specific. It wasn't how I naturally did things. But that ability to put work in a work box, and when you come home from work, leave it at work, and that ability to be 100% present with your family. There are strategies that you can develop, and from modeling people who do that, and that's something we cover on the Do, Delegate or Ditch. We look at how we make a decision, how we perceive time, and how we plan. And what I've discovered over the years is when we're in crisis or something's going wrong, and we ask people the question, what would you like to have happen? If they're trying to get out of danger, sometimes they're just sorting out here. So they might come to me with a business, I need to earn more money, so I need to earn more money. And so they're very much focused on, I've got to work hard, I've got to do more. But the consequences of that working harder and doing more and spending more time there means that they have less time for their own health and well-being. So they might exercise less, they may not eat properly, they may not have social life, they may not do any of their hobbies. So all of the things that actually nurture them as a person, the things that give them time to process information, give them time to think about what's happening and to have the energy to do more things, often gets neglected. So they're focusing on work, maybe their family would also be neglected. I've seen, it saddens me to see executives who work really long hours for 20, 30 years, wanting to provide for their children, wanting to provide a better future, make sure that their wife and their children have got everything they need, or their husband, depending whether it's, whichever gender is the main wage earner. And then when they get to the point where the children are growing up and not needing the parents so much, that there is no relationship between the husband and wife any longer, because this person's been so busy providing security and working and striving to feel of value in the work world, they've done it at the expense of their personal relationships, and so they don't have that network of people. My mum, I know, very much dedicated a lot of her time to her family and didn't have a fulfilling career, and she wished that she had, but she also didn't have a strong network of people that supported her personally. And so when things changed, she didn't have that system to hold the whole thing together. So when you're decision making, one of the things we look at Do, Delegate or Ditch, which is different from just clarity sessions, we start to really widen your perception of checking the consequences of your questions, your decisions. I keep saying questions, I mean decisions. So when you're think about your decision now, is that going to help you to work at your best? Is it going to help you to learn and grow as an individual? Is it nurturing you? And is it going to help you to have the personal life, the family life? Are you going to be living at your very best with that decision in mind? So if you make a decision and you find yourself procrastinating, what I've come to understand is that your subconscious mind knows what's best for you. It's got all the information in there. We can't always retrieve it quickly enough. It's memories that we haven't got hold of, but it has a sense, it has a knowing that isn't going to work for you. And when you take the time to get clarity of what it would be like if you were working at your best, learning your best, living at your best, then you can actually widen your decisions, that when you make a decision, it's going to be inclusive of the whole of your life, not just parts of your life. And so when you've got the whole of it, you've got the width of your decisions being widened, and you've got the depth of it because you've got the different time frames. It's not just survival stuff. Now, sometimes we have to just make survival decisions. But what I know works best is to actually put a date in the diary when you're going to review it, because if you continue to make decisions that are based on that survival mechanism, they don't have longevity, they don't have sustainability, they won't serve us long time, and eventually they become a problem, and then you'll find yourself repeating the same patterns. So make sure your decisions are deep enough, make sure your decisions are wide enough. And then the last bit is I forgot what I'm going to call it now. I've only just written this bit in the book, but it's the height of your decisions. It's like, is it the whole of you? So these are about decisions being inclusive of the whole of your life, inclusive of the time frames, both present and future, and it's about inclusive of the whole of you. So some people, when they made the decisions, it was very head led. So it would be very much about the decision would be based on, can you afford it? So they'll go, no, I can't afford it, can't have that, so that's not going to happen. So other people would make decisions very heart-led, so very emotionally. I feel like I need it. I know that I want it. I've got to have it. There's a real sense inside that I need it. And what most people I found, and this is where I was inspired by the book by Helen Monahan, Successful Business Minds. She talks about the meeting of four minds. But over the years, I've adapted that and developed it with my clients, because what I found was that there was the head, the heart, but there was the gut. People often talk about gut instinct or a gut feeling. And so when we develop that gut feeling in relation to their decision-making model, what we found was that there's lots of information in that part of the system that would inform them to make a decision that was more connected. And other people, I'd look at the whole body, because again, we weren't always making decisions that was good for our health or our well-being. So even if they looked at when they were learning at their best, if they had over the years neglected their body, they hadn't fed it the right food, they hadn't given it good nutrients, they weren't exercising it, the body would have a lot to say. It would start to ache, it would moan, it would whinge, and often the body wasn't being consulted as to what it would like to have happen. And then the last bit was the soul. So it's the real thing that drives us. Now, these will be located differently to different people. My actual logical part of my thinking used to come from my heart. I've noticed it's changing over the last few years as I've become more aligned with it and start to pay more attention. But when I was asking myself the very logical, very sort of analytical questions, it was coming from my heart, whereas my emotional stuff was coming from my head, which is where all my overwhelm was. And it wasn't necessarily coming from a place of passion and love and connection, and it was like, absolutely, this feels like the right thing to do. It was very head emotionally driven, and mainly from fear rather than from passion and love. So it does take some time to check in with yourself. Again, when we're in crisis, our system can seem all out of whack and it can't necessarily tune into the whole thing. When I asked my soul what it would like to have happen and whereabouts was soul, it was actually on the sole of my feet. So for me, soul it is about being grounded, connected with nature. It's about tuning into the rhythms of my system, myself, and working with what my system needs and works with and what works best for it. And I have to work in harmony with my surrounding environment, and that environment will be my physical environment, but it also has to be my family, friends, and people that I care about. So that's a quick motivational. It's not. Do you know what? I don't know if I'm coming or going to it. It's Friday, live Q&A, and today I was talking about decisions wide enough, but I've also talked about, are they deep enough and are they high enough? Because when I ask you the question, what would you like to have happen? If that outcome, that desired outcome that you are going for, is not going to be inclusive of your whole system, and it's not inclusive of your whole life, and it's not inclusive of various time frames, the likelihood is it will have a short-term lifespan. And so what I found with people is that people would come back to me every single month through the clarity retreats, because they would plan for the next 30 days, they'd make a decision for the next 30 days, they'd come in, they'd undo anything that was, they overwhelmed, plan the next 30 days, and that was working. But it wasn't giving them a sustainable clarity, because they were having to reinvent the decision. They were having to make new decisions every single month. And that's when they felt like they were on the treadmill. And that's when we started looking at the do, delegate, or ditch as a process. We started to look at the people who were getting off the treadmill, the people who were starting to feel freer. They had an understanding of their model. They understood their working, learning, living at their best independently models, and they knew what it was like when they had all of it at the same time. They also understood their own time profiles and how they perceived time, and how that impacted their ability to plan the future. And so that meant that when they were making decisions in the moment, it may be a short-term decision, but they also knew it wasn't going to take them too far off of their long-term plan. So for example, I'm doing the Sponsor Slim. I really want to lose £1 a week. My first week, which was last week, I gained £1. So I know that my long-term goal is £33, and I have 30 weeks to do that in. I know that I have to achieve that at £1 a week. But I also know between now and Christmas, I have some holidays. There are going to be some really busy times where I may not prepare as much food in advance. So I've got to allow for some fluctuation. But because I know the long-term plan and the short-term, I know when I'm going off course. I know when it's too much one way. So if I've had too many weeks of gaining, I know exactly at what point it will be too far the other way, and then I have to do something quite drastic in order to bring it back on track. And so that's measurable by weight, but that also could be a feeling that you've got inside. So if you know what it's going to feel like when you're working, learning, and living at your best, you'll know what it's going to be like when you've got it just the way you want to be. You'll know what it's like right now, and you'll know what you need to do to grow that, expand it, to make it more inclusive. And so you can start to feel when you're going off track. So it doesn't matter what your senses are. The lovely thing about clean language is that you can start to do it through whatever your senses are. So it might be how you feel, might be what you see, might be what you hear, but you will start to be able to tune into that and then keep yourself on track with it. Hope that's of use to you this week. I'm going to be head down again now, getting the program ready for Monday. I'm really enjoying doing that. It is challenging trying to translate it, but it's certainly made it much easier for me to try and put it into a training program. So it's helping me to eliminate what I don't need to put in book number 2 that we're waiting for book number 3. So on that note, I'll put a link in the bottom if you are interested in finding out more about Do, Delegate, or Ditch. We have the charity pilot starting on Monday, the 4th of June. It is just £75, and what that will get you is 3 live coaching calls with me, access to me via a Facebook group, but also you will be buying yourself a lifetime membership to the online video recordings that are going to be going up over the next 6 months. They're not going to be on there instantly now with this 3-month program we're running, but the £75 will buy you access to the online program. And this online program will be going live in October, November time. And it will be going out for £4,000 for a 12-month mastermind coaching program. So £75 is a bargain, and the good news is I don't keep any of that money. It goes straight to charity. So all I need is you to donate some money to charity, and you can sign up now to have access to the online video programs for life. Okay, and you'll also get coaching June, July, and August if you're interested. That's in the evening, 7 till 9. So hopefully make it available to everybody that might want to join us. Lots of love. Have a fantastic weekend. Speak to you all soon.